Hi everyone, it's Rax. A new expansion, a new season. You already know that we have to make the class tier list. Got to play the review copy of the game, so try to do my best estimation of how everything will shake out. These tier lists are not perfect, but here's my very best guess, and I think at a minimum, I'm probably going to get the best class in the right spot for rank 1. Let's see how it all turned out. Let's quickly cover the methodology for this video. We're going to rank every class 1st to 6th. 1st is the best, 6th is the worst in all of these different categories. Leveling up is their ability to go from 1 to 60. Speeds are their ability to speed farm Hell Tides, Nightmare Dungeons, Kuros Undercities on, let's say, at least Torment 1 difficulty. Endgame is their ability and quality of life in pushing the pit, getting those super high clears, the tormented bosses, and of course the raids. Survival, I actually removed this category from this tier list, and I think in the future I'm going to replace it with something else. I was just sitting here thinking about it for a long time, and there's tons of different ways to build survivability with the different classes, and it's kind of hard to quantify it relative to the other ones, so I think I'm just going to remove it for now and think about how I want to handle that in the future. Casual is class potential with mostly minimal game time, gear, and skill. Honestly, if you're already checking out my tier list, you're probably a step ahead of most real casuals who don't watch anything. And we'll have a final overall summary and see where everything shakes up. The golden rule, though, is always play what's fun to you, enjoy it in your own way, play however you want. Don't let me tell you how to have fun. For this one, let me hide the webcam so we can see the text. Let me very quickly tell you what's coming in Season 6 and the expansion, if for some reason you haven't heard about it yet. Well, we have a brand new class called the Spiritborn. The leveling progression is completely reworked. Now the max level is 60, and then there's 300 Paragon levels to acquire, and also the difficulties are different, and they removed the capstone dungeons. So raids and the Kuros Undercity are new expansion game modes that we're going to try, and the raids are actually pretty difficult. Mercenaries that follow you around are going to help you, and also there's rune words to socket in your gear as new ways to power up. Some Barb and Druid skills were buffed to bring them up because they were kind of at the back of the classes starting last season. And then Lightning Spear Sorcerers and Victimized Rogues, which was going to be the Goblin Blaster, were significantly nerfed. So we're going to have to see where they end up. There's a Party Finder that's going to help you find friends or enemies. Stats were finally squished a second time after the PTR to hopefully lower the damage numbers. And then the actual season introduces Realm Walkers and Opals for more gear and XP. And finally, there's new Mythic crafting, so you can target your Mythic uniques if you never got the one that you were actually looking for. Coming in last place is the Barbarian. And if I'm being completely honest, Blizzard at the last minute in the last patch notes did try to buff them up, but it's hard to actually see a lot of redeeming qualities for Barbarians. This is pretty much my favorite class, so it's very sad to see how far they have fallen, but maybe they kind of deserve it from how good they were in the entire first year of the Diablo 4. For leveling, I think they're the worst. They're kind of tied with Druids for how slow they can level, but Druids actually got some pretty significant buffs to companions. So I think at least Druids have that. It's hard to see what Barbarians really have for leveling, and they've been one of the worst levelers really since the beginning of Diablo 4. It's not going to change. Barbarians do pretty well in speeds if you stack up all the speeds and the shouts and you play like a whirlwind build. You can be very fast, but you're just not as fast as some of the other classes like the Spiritborn now, which pretty much every single one of their attacks has a built-in dash. And they have, of course, the Eagle specializations, or something like a Sorcerer that has a million teleports, or a Rogue that has essentially just a better spin to win build than the Barbarians. For the end game, it's hard for me to see them doing better than last. There may be some builds for the Barbarian that can clear pretty high pit tiers. There'll probably be like some specialized builds, maybe a Whirlwind build or a Thorns build or a Bash build. But I think pound for pound, across all of their builds, I think in the end game, they're probably going to do the worst. For all these reasons, I think for a casual, for a Barbarian, you're going to have to work the hardest for potentially the lowest output. That's a very bad combination. So overall, I think Barbarians are just last. The best build you can make for a Barbarian is to log out and make a Spiritborn. And for Season 7, I think Barbarians might need a little bit of love everywhere. Blizzard has proven that they can effectively nerf Barbarians into oblivion, but it might be time to slowly creep them back up here so they can be in the mix again. In 5th place, we have our handy-dandy Kenmore Refrigerator. Now, Druids, again, have historically not been very good at leveling. Companions continue to rise. I expect Companions to be a pretty good build in the endgame, and so that's helping them a little bit. Also, when I used their new ability, I believe it's called Stone Burst, and I tried doing leveling with it, it did surprisingly decent damage for having absolutely no aspects on it or anything. So something like that may work very well. In speeds, they can do okay with some of their builds. They always have had, like the werewolf tornado build, but really with their only movement ability still as trample, unless you're playing a build that can move like shred, they just don't have it in them to compete with the other classes. In the end game, their by far strongest build got essentially just straight up canceled, which was Storm Slide, where you throw the landslides to throw lightning storms. That has been completely killed. And that has been replaced by probably Pure Landslide, which might be their best build and might have decent output, but it's nowhere near as good as it used to be. For casuals, for all these different reasons, the only reason to pick Druid is it might be a little bit easier to play than a Barb, and you can slap some companions on there and waltz through the game probably just fine. But overall, I think the Kenmore Refrigerators themselves are going to end up in 5th. Probably their best builds are just a pure landslide build, which would be a slight downgrade from the Storm Slide build that we were using last time. Boiler was saying Boulder might be very good, and Companion got a lot of buffs, and maybe even Hurricane. We'll see if it can do more than 17 damage. In the Season 7, if Stoneburst is not a really meta build for Druid, I don't really know why they added it, so I guess it needs another buff. Moving into the middle of the pack here, we have the Necromancer. Now, the Necromancers are kind of exactly what you would expect them to be. They've got the minion archetype, which has gotten a lot of love, which is very nice because it was an incredible build in Season 4 and then kind of fell off a cliff in Season 5. I think it will definitely be back. Bone Spirit is still very strong, and then new builds are starting to emerge, like maybe some blood builds, like potentially Blood Wave. Now, Necromancers have been kind of the kings of leveling for a long time, and they're still extremely good. Getting a ranking of 3 in leveling still means that you're frying. The minions will do very well, especially if you pair it with something like Blood Surge. That handy-dandy build is going to be godly. For speeds, Necromancers, I think, are the only ones that are slower than a Druid. They made some attempts a few seasons ago to make Necromancers faster, and they are faster, but I'd still say they're easily the slowest. In the end game, again, minions got buffed. Bone Spirit is still very strong. Maybe new builds like Blood Wave will be there. I think they'll do just fine, but it's not going to be anything to post on the fridge or anything. For casuals, this may surprise you. I think Necromancers might be the best choice. They're not too speedy, but again, with all the buffs to minions, you can play minions start to finish and probably clear all content in the game. And it's one of the easiest ways to play Diablo 4. So I think casuals going minion necro might be potentially the very best and easiest choice available to you. Put all that together, we have them in 4th, which is not bad. And their best builds, as we talked about, are minions, Bone Spirit, and Blood Wave. For Season 7, one thing that would make me play Necromancers a hell of a lot more is if they gave us more mobility. Coming in 3rd, I have the Rogue, and the Rogue could have absolutely been put in 2nd. In fact, it almost deserved that ranking. Rogues, I think, are going to be extremely good despite the victimized nerfs. So for leveling, I think they are going to be incredible. In fact, in all the testing that I did, the Rogue almost had the very fastest time, 1 to 60. It only barely got beat by, if you can believe this, a Sorcerer. It only lost to a Sorcerer. So, and the spin to win Goblin Blaster, I think it's called Dance of Knives. I just always call it the Goblin Blaster. That thing fries. It fries for leveling. And the victimized nerfs, as I read them, don't look so devastating, so it might still be a really good endgame build. For speeds, As long as you can move while doing all of that damage, it's like, honestly, to me, just a superior version of Whirlwind. That's how it felt to me anyway. And rogues have so many dashes and so many ways to close the gaps. They're one of the fastest builds around, fastest classes around. In the end game, I think they'll do quite well. I think the Goblin Blaster will still be on the table. The Andariel's Rogue, I believe, is still there. I saw there was like a slight nerf to Andariel's where it procs less often when there's a lot of chaos on the screen, but should still be very good. There's Heartseeker, there's Rapid Fire. Maybe there's even other builds I'm not aware of. Casuals, I do think they'll be a pretty good option. The Spin to Win build is good immediately. It has the second fastest 1 to 60 time that I've seen. So, play that the entire way through if you want. Overall, I'd put Rogues in third, borderline second best class. The Goblin Blaster, which is the Dance of Knives, Spin to Win build, and Dario's Heartseeker and Rapid Fire, I think are going to be great choices. And in Season 7, I'm just going to keep asking. I hope that they buff Victimize again, because that was some of the most fun that I had in Diablo 4. And if it really brought down the Goblin Blaster build, I'm going to be really sad. Coming in second, the class that got by far the biggest nerfs, I would say, and the class that was easily the best last season is the Sorcerer. Now, the Sorcerer got gutted from Lightning Spear from pretty much every angle that they could have been gutted from. But the word on the street is not necessarily a pure lightning spear build, but like a frozen orb lightning spear hybrid might still be a god tier build next season, which would be very nice to see. Sorcerers with like Firewall and Hydra and the new familiars have the fastest leveling time that I've seen in 1 to 60. So it's just that simple. You got to put them in first. Firewall was already a godly leveling build. You add the new fire familiars and you add the Hydras with it, which have been buffed recently, and Sorcerers just terrorize leveling easily. In speed, Sorcerers, they lost maybe the Frozen Orb Lightning Spear stuff, but they buffed the teleport build with Oculus, which if it actually gets to full power with maximum cooldowns, might be the fastest clear in the entire game. So in speeds, they're definitely top tier in Diablo 4 going into Season 6. For the end game, I still expect them to do extremely well. Even if this Frozen Orb Lightning Spear hybrid is not as good as we think it is, there's always Chain Lightning, which is pretty good, and there's also Firebolt and maybe some other things that North War will cook up. So I'm still believing in the Sorcerer, and I think in the end game they will clear all content, and I think they'll do it better than everybody but the class in first place. For casuals, I think they're kind of in the middle. I think you're going to have to work a little bit harder than you would have to if you're on a Necromancer with your minions, or if you're just spinning to winning on your rogue, for example. But if you want to play Sorcerer, that's absolutely fine. You'll do just fine playing like Firewall and Familiar, and then transitioning into one of the really good endgame builds. Overall, I think Sorcerers are about tied with Rogues in like that second and third place. I think they're going to be very good next season. Frozen Orb Lightning Spear, hopefully that's back. Chain Lightning and Firebolt. In Season 7, one thing that I keep noticing about Sorcerers is it always seems to be the same builds. There's so many of the Sorcerer skills like Meteor or Blizzard that really never emerge at the top. I wish Blizzard would give a lot more love to some of these other builds that we just never see. Last but certainly not least, we have the Spiritborn, which is almost rank 1 in every single category that you could ever think of. And in the categories that it doesn't win in, I could just be wrong, and it might be the best in those as well. The Spiritborn seems to be quite a bit better than the other classes, which I guess makes sense because Blizzard probably wants to sell the expansion. But let's start with leveling. So I have Spiritborn leveling in 4th, and the reason why I don't have them higher is because I just don't have definitive proof that they can level faster than a Minion Necro or a Spin to Win Rogue or a Firewall Familiar Sorcerer. When I see it, when I can properly time it and test it, they might move up. Who knows? Maybe all the way to first. It's really close between the 4 builds, but I don't have proof that they're faster, but maybe like an Eagle build or maybe a Centipede build can get it done. For speeds, I think they're pretty much the best, especially when you play some of these Eagle builds. They move so fast, and all of their attacks have essentially an innate dash within them. They just fly around the battlefield and essentially just do whatever they please. In the end game, I've seen some Eagle builds and some Centipede builds just crush the end game content. I haven't seen Jaguar or Gorilla skills have quite the output, but that might just be because of a lack of theory crafting. Someone might figure out some incredible combinations over there as well. For casuals, the only reason why I don't have them in first place is the Spiritborn does require a little bit of theory crafting. It does sometimes require a little bit of a correct rotation and understanding how all the pieces work. When I compare that to a minion necro, this is absolutely not true. You just put on your minions and walk forward, and you just waltz through the entire game. That's probably a little bit better for casuals, but the output of the Spiritborn is so high that you can play it many different ways and still probably conquer everything in the game. For those reasons, I think the Spiritborn is easily the best by far from everything that I've seen. I think some of the best builds will be Centipede, specifically like Touch of Death seems very strong, and some of the Eagle builds like what's it called, Quill Volley. I'm really bad with the names, but the feather stuff, very strong. Best thing that we can ask for in Season 7 is please don't nerf the shit out of Spiritborns, because I'm really worried it's going to be rank 1 in Season 6 and then nerfed into obscurity in Season 7. Don't do that, Blizzard. Here's our favorite little summary slide if you'd like to pause and take a screenshot and see how everything's shaped up. I'll tell you something very interesting, though, about the rankings. If you look at the bottom, I did not plan this at all or had this preconceived notion. The rankings are exactly the same as how my revised Season 5 ranking summary was, just with Spiritborn at the top. You can see every other class at the bottom just slid down one rank. It actually ended up being exactly the same. And one more slide, our favorite historical ranking sheet, where we see where all of the different classes ended up in all of the different tier lists. You can see that Druids are kind of the bastard child, the Kenmore refrigerators of Diablo 4, whereas Spiritborns are starting very, very strong with that solid 1 in first place. That's going to wrap up the video for this morning, guys. What did you think about this class tier list? Did anything that I show you surprise you? Do you think that I'm way off, or do you think I'm exactly on point here? Either way, I will be very interested to see how everything shapes up, and especially if I'm very, very wrong about things, I will make an updated tier list, I don't know, a week or so into the season, and I will happily admit everything that I was terribly wrong about. Anyway, I hope this helps you guys make some decisions, and I can't wait to see you on Monday. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.